Sometimes it is seen that railroads were doomed. The Durango-Silverton Railroad is one of the most spectacular rides in the world. In 1960, it was nearly shut down. In 1883, the Orient Express ran from Paris to Istanbul and created the ultimate in luxury travel. It was abandoned in 1977. In 1887, rotary snowplows first fought the snowdrifts in the high Sierras. Looking like relics, they seem improbable holdovers from the past. Once this streamlined locomotive hauled passenger trains at 100 miles an hour, but for 20 years it sat outside a museum, its machinery rusting. Yet today, these trains still run the rails. Now they evoke a more remote past, when trains first bridged the continent, ferried recruits to war, provided celebrities with an opportunity to be seen and a chic way to travel, gave a mobile campaign platform to politicians, and offered a refuge for hobos. Train tracks disfigure the countryside. Trains assault the senses with brutal noise and begrind the air. How then account for the multitude of people who love trains?
You're actually running a train. You just can't get enough. I don't know, maybe I'm just a junkie for trains, but that's about it.
I bought a caboose back in the 50s because I was busy riding trains in the 50s, and suddenly I read in the paper one day where trains were going to go out, all passenger trains would be taken off. And I knew unless I got a piece of the train, I would never be able to ride on the train again, so that's when I bought my caboose and put it in my yard.
There are grown men who ride toy steam trains at a mountain retreat. There are train buffs who choose to ride through South America's Andes on a baggage rack. There's a town in Iowa that honors hobos. And there are thousands of young people competing for the chance to engineer a train. These are people who hearken to the lonesome whistleblowing and the clickety-clack of wheels on rails. Theirs is a worldwide fraternity with no membership requirements beyond sharing in the love of trains.
You've got a sheet like this, and it tells you who's sitting in every seat, and every seat is assigned.
There are many people so enamored of trains that they take trains not to go anywhere, but just for the pleasure of riding. Each year, the North Alabama Railroad Club sponsors an all-day excursion on a Norfolk Southern steam train. Seats are always sold out, and there's even competition for a chance to work on the engine. Bill Hayslip is a deputy sheriff, and he loves trains so much that he volunteers on his day off for the dirtiest job in railroading, apprentice fireman.
I've studied steam engines just about all my life. I guess I was born about 30 or 40 years too late. There's something about a steam locomotive, a railroad, it's just romantic. The steam engine kind of has its own personality. It's like a lady. You have to treat it just right.
Well, it's just a page out of the past. Something I seen when I was a kid. Once you get used to anything, you always like to see it again. If we hadn't had them during World War II, we'd have been up the creek without a paddle.
Steam engines evoke a special affection. Though inanimate objects of iron and steel, they seem to breathe with the fire of life. This day, the train will run to Chattanooga, Tennessee, evoking cherished memories of a popular song.
Pardon me, boys, Chattanooga choo-choo. Yes, sir. Track 29. Boy, you can give me a shine. Can you afford to board the Chattanooga choo-choo? I got my fare and just a trifle to spare. There's gonna be a certain party at the station, satin and lace, I used to call funny face. She's gonna cry until I tell her that I'll never roam. So Chattanooga choo-choo, won't you choo-choo me home? Take me home.
I've often wondered if I was maybe one of those people that had trains in my blood or something, you know. Some people have alcohol, I have trains. And I spend all day in Birmingham just to see the two trains go through town. So my wife thinks that that's crazy, but you know, it's a thrill for me.
It's the most consoling, soothing, wonderful, inspiring type of music that you can ever hear. I've been on trains all over the world, and I've watched and I've seen this. It's sort of a indefinable love, I guess, but you find it from kings down to the common man.
Partway through the trip, the train comes to a stop in an open field. Now begins the prized ritual of the steam train excursion. The train backs up, cameras are ready. And then a sweet symphony for every train buff's ear. The train station in Chattanooga has been transformed into an entertainment center. When the train returns to Huntsville, Dr. and Mrs. Looney Lindsay stay on in Chattanooga for dinner in a refurbished diner. They remember another train trip long ago.
We got on the train in Tuscumbia, Alabama, and we went to Chattanooga. Went up to the courthouse. We got married. And that was 55 years ago, and we've had a very lovely marriage so far. And here 55 years later, we do that same stunt over again.
The most popular rooms at the Choo Choo Hilton Hotel are old train cars, a nostalgic setting for recapturing fond memories. For those who love to ride steam trains, each trip is a journey into the past. In the beginning, steam engines were at the center of the Industrial Revolution, which could not even begin until mankind learned one crucial trick: how to transform heat energy into motion. In the 1st century A.D., the Greek scholar Harrow of Alexandria invented steam jet propulsion. Harrow's ingenious device remained a toy until 1712, when Thomas Newcomen developed the first successful steam engine. Newcomen's engine was used to pump water out of coal mines. 100 years passed before the first British-built steam locomotives took to the rails. Soon the public everywhere crossed the threshold of a new age as horses were replaced by the latest locomotive invention. Today, these early engines can usually be seen only at museums, where they seem as distant as dinosaurs. The John Bull is the oldest operable steam engine in the world. To mark the 150th anniversary of its first American trial, the Smithsonian Institution brought it out for a run along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. People who loved trains dressed up for the occasion and gathered from miles around. Many had never heard the hoot of a steam whistle or the screech of brakes. Nostalgia for those seemingly innocent days of American history is very much alive today. For some, no doubt, steam engines are the attraction. For others, perhaps, it is the appeal of travel. Or could it be that so many share the romantic notion of growing up to be an engineer? These trains are called live steamers. Seymour Johnson loves trains so much that he donated land and equipment for a miniature railroad at his home in Montecito, California.
I think in my case, in the case of a lot of people, you kind of grew up with them as toys, and these are pretty big toys, but I started building this particular engine in 1947, and I completed it in 1951, and that's why I have the numbers on the side, 4751, to remind me of the time.
Johnson and the local members of the Goleta Valley Railroad Club spent 17 years building their line. Today, they test their engines on more than a mile of track.
There's something nostalgic about steam engines now, of course, but the thing is, a steam locomotive is live. The engine talks to you when you're running it. You can feel what it's doing. It tells you I'm working too hard or I'm taking it easy. You can hear it in the stack. You can hear it in the sound of the blower and the sound of the fire. They got steam engines that are over 100 years old that continue to run.
Once a year, Johnson and the club host a 3-day meet that attracts model owners from all over the country. Each engine is custom built, representing thousands of hours of meticulous machining. And as in real life, the engineers discover that steam engines can be cantankerous beasts, capable of fighting back.
Well, this is a 2.5-inch scale, narrow gauge locomotive built to run on 7 1/2-inch track. We're trying to duplicate exactly the kind of engine that the Colorado and Southern used back in the years of 1890 through 1936.
Hey, John, you want to push the daylight cars into the sidings?
The most popular daily event is the grand tour of the line for families and friends. 3 engines are coupled. Together, they are pulling 6 tons of engines, cars, and passengers.
We now have 14 cars. Mostly they're freight car type because people are way out of scale. This train is 1/8 full size, but people aren't. So if you put them in a passenger car, you can't put a roof on. But if you put them in a freight car, the sky's the limit.
Many of those who build and enjoy riding live steamers can still recall the old days when steam engines ruled the rail. The halcyon days of steam and rail began after World War I. The big boy of the 1940s was driven by 4 pistons that powered 16 drive wheels. It was the largest steam engine ever built and could pull a train 5 miles long. And during World War II, steam engines transporting the freight, weapons, and troops to the seacoast made possible the fast buildup of America's war machine. In the 1950s, steam gave way to diesel, and rail companies competing for passengers promoted streamliners as the chic way to travel. But late in the decade, passengers shifted to automobiles and airplanes for long-distance travel, and trucks took over much of the freight. The low point came in the 1970s. Congress rescued 6 bankrupt railroads by creating Conrail. Railroad lines were abandoned, and hundreds of stations closed for good. Although Americans seem to lose interest in passenger train travel, some countries maintained their trains as national treasures. The narrow-gauge Guayaquil and Quito Railway in Ecuador plays a vital part in national life, and people here use the railroad like a party line. It even serves as a food market on wheels. Train buff and writer Carla Hunt has traveled throughout South America on trains. The Guayaquil to Quito run draws her back as the most exciting in South America. A train buff's dream, an American-built Baldwin engine, a relic from 1900, begins a two-day climb from sea level to over 11,000 feet in the Andes. Passengers have a choice of three classes. Second class costs $1.60. First class cars sport padded seats for $2.10. And local vendors offer lunch on brown paper. The affluent who ride deluxe get reserved seats and meal service. But some prefer the roof, where conductors seldom collect tickets.
You meet a lot of people. You carry a dictionary. Can't get along. I don't speak Spanish, but I'm learning. When you really get in trouble, you use hands. You smile a lot. And you admit that you're a foreigner.
American engineers laid out the route in 1898. It took 10 years to cut the line from the sugarcane fields of the lowlands up over the Andes. When the train going up fails to meet the train coming down at the appointed siding, there's an unscheduled stop for a phone call to find out what happened to the other train.
These trains, not only do they carry the people up and down, but they carry the mail. And every once in a while you see them with a medical prescription, a telex that might have come into Guayaquil but can't make it up between the two points. There's a telex facility at Riobamba, but between here and Riobamba there's absolutely nothing.
The trains coming from Riobamba have problem in Guigra. One of the wheels of the machine was falling down off the track. And now we are going to this train to help the other train to ride to Guigra.
Ah, fantastico.
Derailments are common, but the speeds are slow and the accidents usually minor. As a bonus, amateur supervisors get a chance to see how, with a minimum of equipment, a derailed car can be coaxed back onto its track. After a change of engines, the train climbs into the mountains once again. In the early days of the American West, railroad builders often resorted to zigzagging switchbacks to gain altitude. On this line, a famous switchback is still in use. The train has proceeded as far as it can up the valley. Now it switches to another track and backs up the side of Devil's Nose, giving passengers on the rear platform a front-end view. The train backs around the mountain, then switches again to climb higher. Going forward again, the train has climbed 300 vertical feet up the side of the mountain. At the end of the first day, the train stops at Riobamba. For Carla Hunt, a visit to the market is a fascinating feature of the trip.
People come from miles around to sell and buy. You see things in this market you won't see anywhere else in Latin America. But more than anything else, I like to wander around and look at all those beautiful faces.
Yeah, you're thinking.
From Riobamba to Quito, the train is really a bus on rails. There are seats inside, but for hardy train buffs like Carla Hunt, there is a much more exciting vantage point.
The place I like to ride is up on the luggage rack on top. That's the best sightseeing seat in South America. To go through the mountains and to climb over the two ranges of the Andes, to go through the beautiful upland villages, with all the wild changes of weather en route, there's nothing in the world like it.
Clouds shroud the peaks of the Andes as the line climbs high through cuts in the mountains, and then descends to Ecuador's capital, the Spanish colonial city of Quito, to bring to an end one of the world's most extraordinary train rides. In the United States, another spectacular train ride inspired one train buff to take dramatic action. The line from Durango to Silverton, Colorado was threatened with abandonment in 1960. Charles Bradshaw, Jr., a Florida citrus grower, rescued it in 1981. Like many a town in the Old West, Durango was created by a railroad. The Denver and Rio Grande chose the site, laid out the streets, and sold lots around the depot. Young people who share Bradshaw's enthusiasm for trains keep it running.
I love it. I really love it. I go home and tell my husband, I learned all kinds of new things. I would like to be an engineer very much. You have to go through all the training, which is pretty physical for a girl. And then you have to also be a fireman, which you shovel 6 tons of coal a day. And I wouldn't want to get out of my limit. I don't think that's right.
My father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather were all railroaders before me. They worked for the Rio Grande, not this particular branch. I'm the first one in the family to work for this branch of the railroad. But none of them were conductors. They were all in different parts of the railroad, so I'm the first conductor in the family.
They have to be pretty responsible people. They can't be irresponsible at all.
Aren't you pretty young to be an engineer?
I hear that about 30 times a day. If I couldn't handle the job, I wouldn't be here.
No, let's trade. Listen, cowboy hats are out. Haven't you seen the chicks? Let him try.
Let him try on a large.
I'll bet nobody in your neighborhood would have a hat like that. Don't you think? I'm telling you, you go home and the girls will be lining up at the door. Now that looks handsome on you. That really does. Cowboy hats are out. Engineer hats are in.
Silverton is only 45 miles from Durango, but to get there, the train must climb almost 3,000 feet. In the 1870s, huge discoveries of ore were made in the mountains surrounding Silverton. But there was no economical way to get the ore out. The railroad made the mines profitable. The ore is now removed by truck. The traffic has changed. But the town still prospers, mining tourist dollars. As soon as the route was completed, the drama of the train's traverse of the Animas River Canyon was recognized as one of the great sights of American railroading. In the early 1880s, photographer William Henry Jackson lowered himself into the canyon to take this picture, published in Harper's Weekly magazine. Today's passengers can still enjoy the same spectacle. The ride is potentially just as dangerous now as it was then. A derailment could topple the cars 200 feet into the gorge. An extraordinary train run has been preserved because of the dedication of one man and the delight that more than 100,000 people a year take in supporting the line. Boston has its marathon, New Orleans its Mardi Gras. Britt, Iowa honors hobos. Once a year, this small town invites hobos from all over the country to drop by for a visit. The get-together largely attracts those who have retired from actively riding the rails and can now look back on their former ragtag wanderings with nostalgia. Hobos were not always so honored. Hoboing began during hard times after the Civil War. And in the Great Depression, the desperate once again took to the rails. Sometimes railroad police threw them off moving trains. Others jumped rather than face the reception they received when caught crossing state lines.
If we are to protect the public of Southern California from the indigent transient class, they are coming here at this time not for the purpose of securing work, but for the purpose of living on relief, stealing, or begging.
Where's your home? Chicago. You ride a freight all the way from Chicago?
Yes, sir.
Well, you can ride them back, too, or any way you can to get back. We're going to see you over the state line. Don't come back to California until you can come in like a man.
Hobo camps are called jungles, and life in them has always been hard. But in Britt, Iowa, the jungle is a place to renew friendships and swap stories.
78.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember you.
Memory that bad?
It was. And now wait a minute. Every year you get older, you have a special privilege. Every year you will get a little bit better at forgetting.
Yes, I am there already.
Hobos are known most often by their nicknames. Steam Train was first elected Hobo King in 1973.
We got a young goat here, and it's gonna be some pretty tender eating when we get him all browned up here. Yes, sir. We have some of the best music and some of the best food you ever sit down to.
Was you good gal when my train left the shed? Where was you, honey, when that train left the shed? Standing on my front step, wishing I was dead.
Time has reversed these hobos' roles. Once they were outcasts. Now, Brit youngsters look up to them as knights of the open road who seem to have lived in a mythological age.
Could I get your autograph?
Oh, I guess you could, only I know what you want to waste time on a guy like me.
Got my pad and paper.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to be a writer.
You're going to be a writer?
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
I'm going to try at least.
You got to have more than six grades of education. That's all I got.
That's my name.
That's your name? Well, this is mine.
Mountain Dew. I was talking to the hobo queen, and she says, "Would you like to be hobo?" And I said, "Sure." And I go, "How do you be hobo?" And she said, "Well, she pulled out this kind of perfume stuff or whatever it is, and she goes, I acquire you the prince, hobo prince," and she put some on my forehead. So I'm a hobo prince. That's and my name is Beer Belly Bob.
I started out when I was about 16 and had 12 years on and off, different places, working irrigation ditches up in Washington, or cutting pulpwood in New York, doing lifeguard work down in Miami Beach, working gypsum plant in Yuma, Arizona, washing dishes in California, you know, different stuff like that. Worked in the coal mine, but they give me a day shift, and then when I went in, it was dark. When I come out, it was dark, and I worked there 2 weeks. I told them when they put windows in there, I'd come back to work.
How long did you hobo from when to when?
About, 1931 to 38, something like that.
What satisfaction of being free. Being free in other words, not have to count to anybody for your actions.
As the sun sets, the hobos gather around a fire, and balladeers recall the hard days of Depression time.
I wander in ashes to ashes, dust unto dust. If the railroad doesn't get you, then the bread lines must. And it looks like I'm never gonna cease my wander.